All right, folks. Welcome. You are now tuned into something of a treat, right? You are tuned in to a very special edition of the Ujamaa Hour, a very impromptu edition. This was put together over the course of, just one day. A conversation with someone, very dear to me, a mentor, someone who I consider a friend, and someone who has stewarded me into the work that I consider my life's work, right? The work that happens here within the Kola Nut Collaborative, the work that happens around the Kola Nut Collaborative, the work that the Kola Nut Collaborative is involved in, is in very large part due to this person that I'm going to be speaking with tonight. And I've tried quite a bit to get this person on, and so I hope that you all enjoy this conversation, as I'm sure that as I'm sure that I will enjoy it. Right. So before we begin, let's just go ahead into our formalities and our introductions. I am Michael Ticken. I am Michael Tickenstrode, founding coordinator of the Kola Nut Collaborative Time Bank. The Kola Nut Collaborative is Chicago's only time-based service and skills exchange, otherwise known as the Time Bank, a space for community engagement, network weaving, and really getting people to unpack their skills and their capacities with the folks in their neighborhood, with the folks in the communities where they live. And you have joined me tonight on the Ujamaa Hour. The Ujamaa Hour is our a space to explore, a space of exploration of an intimate and informal exploration of the Black social solidarity economy through intimate informal conversation. I muddle that all the time, so yeah, you'll just have to forgive me on that. But yes, I'll go over it one more time, and exploration of the Black social solidarity economy through intimate, informal conversation. That's the point. And why is that, right? Why is it intimate and why is it informal? Because that economy, that economic construct itself is informal, right? It's not academic in nature. It's something that we live within, that we breathe within. It's something that no one has had to define for us, but it has been the way that we have engaged ourselves in this practice, in this process. Since before we were brought to these shores, right? And as Black people, and it's something that no one needs to tell us about, right? But the popular education mantra, we start from our experience. It is our experience. It is our lived experience. It is our lived practice. And I like to have conversations about it because I appreciate the ways that it presents itself and that it shows itself. And even as I now engage with lots of people who are on the academic side of the solidarity economy, I want them to understand the informal practice that lives here when they begin to speak to these communities and into this conversation, that they know how to translate, right? Because they oftentimes they miss that translation. So that's what we're here to do, right? The Ujamaa Hour, the Kola Nut Collaborative, and myself, we exist as translators. Sometimes, and sometimes we ignore and we eschew and we say we don't need to translate because you probably don't need to be entering into this conversation. But I digress. We are here for one key purpose. That is to speak to, again, this person that I mentioned, very special to me. Very very special mentor and the work here. I'm here to chop it up tonight with Baba Fred Carter of Black Oak Center for Sustainable Renewable Living, or Black Oak Center. There's some other ending to that name, but we'll get into it. And I had an opportunity, today, in terms of prepping for this conversation, to do something different, in terms of this practice that I'm now going into with this interview series. I've now started a set of conversational maps that I've been doing to help me prep for these dialogues. And it really, I've been really experimenting with these conversational maps, and I'm loving the possibility this has opened up for what the dialogues are going to look like going forward for the rest of the year. So make sure that you look out for the rest of the episodes of the Ujamaa Hour. Coming up this month is Taryn Randall of getting Getting grown. Yes. So yeah, make sure you look out for Taryn Randall this month of Getting Grown Collective. And with that, I want to go ahead and leave no further delay. I want to bring on Baba Fred Carter into the Ujamaa Hour. Welcome to the Ujamaa Hour, Baba Fred.
How you doing, brother? Great,
All right, all
great.
right. Yeah. So I mean, here we are.
Not enough light. It's a
it's
real dark background.
understood. Well, I mean, it's working. You're on the eco campus, so we certainly understand that the
Right.
conditions of nature are what they are. And we have tried, to negotiate this conversation a few different times. I think we had booked for maybe it was early 2020. I want to say it was in January 2020, or maybe it was 2019. But in any case, we're here now. We got the conversation locked in. We got a special edition episode, and we want to go ahead and dig into your backstory and your life, and make sure we get this on record. Um, so I'm going to kick into the broad question. Who is Fred Carter?
That's a good question, right?
Yes, sir.
So who is Fred Carter separate from the conditioning that he was brought up in? Um, Fred Carter was born in Philip, Mississippi, on a farm, 160-acre farm, in 1951, by a beautiful woman named Edith Carter. She's still with us. And Eunice Carter was my father, the first of the second child of nine. And the first farm, I was born on the farm, but my mother and father bought 160 acres when they got married. So I got deep roots with the land. So that was a good while. We left Memphis from Chicago, from Memphis to Chicago. And I grew up on the west side of Chicago and moved to the south side. And that began a new journey, a revolutionary journey. Prior to that, I was a disciple and a lot of other things along that pathway. But at Calumet High School, we had an opportunity to create a whole new paradigm in that community. The first breakthrough we had was enrolling Fred Hampton to come to Calumet High School to speak. And that was truly a revolutionary moment. During that time, I was responsible for the security of an organization called Costco, and we were at that time trying to organize different black people in the Chicagoland area, at high schools. So my family, which is a part of my conditioning too, right? My family was in farming and transportation. So I went to school learning farming and transportation. Also, ended up in school to learn about my body and healing, which was a naturopath. I was in school to be a naturopath. A few years, about 10 years after that, I started, 15 years after that, I went to Life Chiropractic College in Marietta, Georgia. And I moved back to Chicago after that. But who Fred Carter is, I'm a certified permaculturalist educator. I'm certified in, not that certification mean anything. For me, it doesn't, but for some people, it does. My understanding of land, power, solar energy, alternative energies. I've been trained in alternative energies. I used to make my own biodiesel when I lived in Chicago and out here. I used to teach classes in bioenergy. And we also taught classes in um, other forms of energy like solar and geothermal. We did that quite a bit in Chicago. And we also did it out here on the land. So who Fred Carter is an expression of genetic history and sustainability for our people. As I was mentioning earlier, you know, the way we use the term sustainability, which is a European term now, our indigenous history was based on whole language, a language that was whole. So when we spoke about the earth and our relationship to the earth, it was not cut up into 20 different layers. So what I'm attempting to do now is create a language that allow us to reconnect to our land. Um, it's important that we reconnect to the land because the reconnecting to the land also help us to can reconnect to our ancestors, and also it help us reconnect to the profound, deep mother of the earth.
And so the that work is happening now through this entity called Black Oak Center. So why don't you help folks understand who and what is Black Oak Center? Uh,
Black Oak Center is a an organization, a non for profit that we started in 2006 after leaving an event in Yellow Springs, Ohio, at the Antioch College. It was called an organization, it was a non for profit too, called the Community Solution. How we got into that was I used to be a tier one for General Motors. I ran one of the eighth largest distribution centers for General Motors for 3 years. That's what I mentioned about transportation. We closed the business down. I didn't know what to do with myself. I looked back, and one of the things I always wanted to do was be into alternative energies. So I took a course in Custer, Wisconsin, in solar hot water. But in the process of doing that, my teacher, who was an old hippie, only person that would speak to me in the whole class was my teacher, but that's all I needed. He had me buy a book called The Party Is Over. In fact, I had no conscious awareness of the power of the land at that time. I was just as numb as most people. In fact, I ran away from the land like my ancestors did too. So when we first got exposed to this thing of environment, sustainability, it started in Wisconsin. And from out of that, it opened up a whole new paradigm, which is now called Black Oak Center for Sustainable Renewable Living. We just recently changed the name to just Black Oak Center. But in 2004, there was a big conference in Yellow Springs, Ohio, about energy and peak oil and environment. And at the time, me and my wife and my son was the only Black Americans in the room. It was a room of about 600 people at Antioch College who was very upset of the politics of the Bush administration and that they were lying about what the war was about. Um, but that wasn't really the crux of what emerged, what we call Black Oaks out of. What Black Oaks emerged out of was a conversation that was being held in the room that we was going to go through some very stressful moments, long moments, what they call a long emergency, long cycles of resource depletion, resource constraints, political disruption globally, water shortages, food shortages, energy shortages, all the things that we're experiencing now. And the statement was made that the people who is going to have the most difficult time transitioning through this who may not be able to transition through it was black people. And that they were going to go and teach and educate their community, number one, to be more conscious of energy in the environment. Number two, to not fight each other when these resources become more constrained, and to educate themselves in the emerging paradigm around energy, food, natural building of housing, and the educational paradigm that was emerging out of that. The old mind was dying, and they also acknowledged that their children would not have the level of power and influence that they grew up taking for granted. Now, when we heard that, we looked at each other and said, "We got to go back home." We had to go back home, and we created Black Oak Center to inform and educate our community and how to make this transition and still be in existence. That's what Black Oak Center was created for. That's the mission that has never gotten off. Um, and we're still going on since 2006. We During that same time, we had bought 40 acres of land here in Pembroke Township. We're about 60 miles south of Chicago, and that's what Black Oak Center is. It's an eco campus. We call it eco because campus, because our primary intent is to educate and inform and support people learning this lifestyle. We would always say that we fell in the rabbit hole first, but everybody's gonna have to come down this rabbit hole with us. So Black Oak Center is this ancestral vortex to reconnect our people back to their indigenous roots with the land and also with the environment and being empowered about that, controlling our energy, controlling our building, controlling our plate, controlling our food, and controlling our education.
Hmm. Um, Current mission on the site. I certainly remember, a different mission, but I recognize as things evolve. Our mission is to facilitate communities in being resilient. For you, what does it mean to be resilient? Or what is community resilience as a practice, as a lifestyle?
Community resilience to me is to have the capacity to manage all those four elements that make life possible: energy, food, your housing and dwelling, and your mind. We have four educational tracks: sustainable energy, sustainable building, uh, sus- uh, um, sustainable agriculture. And the crown of that is the resiliency track. So the resiliency for me is having a powerful relationship to things in the world that allow you to be what they call resilient. It allows you to be healthy, responding to whatever's occurred. You can maintain integrity of your community. You can go through it and come out on the other side and still exist. That's a form of resilience. It's the biological interpretation of resiliency. Is a system that responds to shock and disruption and return back to a state of equilibrium. Um, but for us, we have to have a different interpretation of resiliency. We don't want to return back to the state that we know. That was not a very resilient state. For us, it's a different interpretation. So Europeans have a different terms of resiliency. They want to maintain what they got. So any disruption in that power base and control, they want to be able to go through it and come back into what they call a state of equilibrium, which is dominance and control. And for us as a people, That is not the way we want to be resilient. Uh, Returning back to a stable state, or what they call a steady state of racism, suppression, uh, losing your land, and illness, and all the things that we experience on a day-to-day basis, is not resilient for us. And somehow the resiliency is tied to sustainability. Sustainability is what we're talking about now. Sustaining the status quo, regardless of what happens. If you shortage of this, shortage of that, wars, disruption, you want to sustain those entities. All right? Be it your family or whatever it is, your business, your whatever it may be that you're trying to sustain. But for black people, indigenous people, I don't know if we really want to try to sustain the state that we're in now. We need a regenerative state. Uh, Resiliency is fine, but regenerativeness is the living process that allows you to perpetuate your species in a harmonious form. That's how I'm languaging it now. So we used to say resilient. I want to be resilient. What the hell is the resilient? Oh, I mean, I can deal with a shock. We in shock 24 hours a day
Hmm.
in our community. We're always in a state of shock. That's a problem. We never, if you look around, what you see is not coming back to stability. We're in a constant state of shock and assault. So resiliency for us is different, and so is sustainability. I mean, I had to really confront that when I saw the Department of Defense create their sustainability department. When I saw the government, federal government, talk about sustainability, Walmart. Well, Walmart was one of the biggest ones. They had a sustainability department too. So sustainability, we got to look a little deeper into those terms because they're perverted now. They're very perverted. They've been confiscated by everybody using them. So I'm talking about regenerative lifestyle. Being regenerative is not unconnected to being resilient. Those are elements of being resilient. Being able to regenerate yourself and recreate yourself, regardless of what occurs in your life cycle, is really the essence of resiliency. But we don't talk about the regenerative element. We talk about being resilient like it's some abstract kind of thing. It's no growth in resiliency. It's no learning, no improvement in it. It's just you get shocked and you come back, But we don't come back as a group. We have not come back. No one really comes back, you know. So it's really misleading. But life is very regenerative. Even though there's shocks, but it never returns back to the past. So that's what we want more of. We want more regenerative life. We don't want resiliency or sustainability because those are terms mean that the current structure can stay in place. It goes through a disruption, which we just came through the COVID, all the uprisings all over the place, and go back to that steady state of dominance and control.
Hmm. So I want to pivot slightly to I encountered Healthy Food Hub, or pardon me, Black Oaks, in around '08, '09. The
Yeah.
wonderful Mama Roberta reaches out to me, says, "Hey, I know some folks need a website done. You do websites?" I didn't do websites. For those folks, who are into technology, I was building in Macromedia Dreamweaver at the time. And it wasn't like I was very accomplished or skilled at it, but I was willing to put in some work for the movement. So helped support a revitalization or revising of the Black Oaks website. Um, and that's how I met you and Dr. Jafunza, and launched into the journey of the Healthy Food Hub, and so and one of the things that like strikes me is like the reason that I tell everybody about it, right, is that there's a number of different reasons, right? But one key reason is that it's a site of tremendous experimentation. There were people who were willing to dare and to try and to attempt and say, we don't necessarily know what we're doing, but we're gonna work on this experiment together, and we're gonna wrestle with the challenges and wrestle with the problems. We didn't always kind of figure them out. So if you want to kind of give people background one on sort of how the Healthy Food Hub was meant to advance the mission and the aims of Black Oak Center, and then anything else that you want to share on that the value
Yeah,
of experimentation.
yeah. The thing that people are most aware of as it relates to Black Oak Center is the Healthy Food Hub. The Healthy Food Hub was actually created to address the collapsing food system, right? And which we're experiencing now. It was designed to create a local food system that's community based that will allow us to manage every element in the supply chain, which will allow us to be more sustainable, more stable, and more empowered by controlling those elements. You can't just do one element inside of that. And inside of the Healthy Food Hub, we had a wealth wheel. It was 12 elements in that wheel. There was transportation, there was distribution, there was production of food, there was value added of food, there was packaging of food, there was making compost, there was seeds, um, technology. All those elements was in the health wheel of the Healthy Food Hub. And the reason we call it a health wheel because we were addressing an area that we do every day. We eat every day as people. Some of us eat 3 meals a day, some eat less, and some eat more. But we don't control anything in that. We don't control our plate. We don't control the transportation of why food is. And what I meant earlier about is multiple layers. The Healthy Food Hub is really a whole based system of community development. Because if you control the agriculture, that means you control all the fibers and things that come from the soil, right? It ties to energy. Energy, all our energy basically, other than photosynthesis, comes from the soil. Our food comes from the soil. The fibers, fabric, building material come from the earth, the soil. Our buildings come from the earth. Our educational frame is a science that emerged out of ecology and the earth sciences, which includes cosmic sciences, all the other theological forms of science, visible and invisible. So the Healthy Food Hub was this whole system way of designing a community response for becoming more stable and secure. Now, we didn't language it that way initially, but the space I'm in right now, that was the design and intent. We can create our own employment with our plate. We can determine and control our own health. We can determine how we build our facilities, how we control our energy. All that was clustered in the Healthy Food Hub. Um, because you can't build a farm without building your energy systems into it. You can't transport your produce without having transportation. You can't transport something without energy. You can't package it or build fertilizers and things like that. All those were income streams that we had designed into the Healthy Food Hub. But we designed it in a way that it was whole. It's not one piece. Like now we have a lot of so-called outsourcing frames of thinking. Instead of dealing with the whole, we want to outsource an element. Now the broader community is recognizing vertical integration is the best way to make sure that you're stable. When I outsource my shoes to you, one day you may have a problem. You might not want to sell them to me. So I'm without shoes. If I made my own shoes, I can grow the material that allows me to make that shoe, and the surplus I can sell to my neighbors, my friends, and other communities. But when you outsource it to somebody else, and this is what we've come to live like, we so into outsource. We outsource our pleasures, our pains, and everything else. So what we created was a whole system, a whole. It was what we used to call the Malika mycelium. It's whole and complete. If we live inside of that complete system, there is no insecurity. There is no absolute uncertainty. There is always some uncertainty because we don't never really fully know the future. But the problems that we're experiencing now as a community or as a business, the uncertainty of being in business because you don't even control your supply chain. Somebody else is deciding whether or not you stay in business because they price you out. So that's what we looked at. We looked at the Healthy Food Hub as a vehicle to address all that. Because I was in transportation, and I was a sizable company. And I had a guy to come and tell me that you got too big for your britches. We're not going to sell you any fuel. And it was a shock. We recovered from that because we started buying commodities, edging. We did a lot of other stuff. But what I realized later, I said that wouldn't have been a problem. It was all if I was making my own fuel. If I was making my own fuel from a source that I have control over, like the waste streams in our community, or I can grow the feedstock, no one can tell me that I couldn't move my vehicles around because they wouldn't supply me the energy to do it. That's where that thinking came from, and that was reflected in the healthy food hub. Even the food. No one can tell me that, well, I can't sell you your packaging, sir. Somebody got to go in this business myself. So every element in the supply chain around food is the economy that we need right now. Um, the food economy was our hope doing this was to create a multi-million-dollar network entity because if we were able to carve out, even if it was 1% of our purchasing of food and did it within our own group, you're talking billions of dollars. And if that's just one element of it, just like, for instance, second congressional district, the blacks in the second congressional district spend $1.6 billion a year on food. If we did 1 or 2% of that through an entity or a network of entities, our economics in those communities would look a lot different. Our health would look different. Our politics would be different. Everything would be different. So the Healthy Food Hub was, like I said, it's a whole approach. It's a whole approach to not only health in the physical body, but health in the community and a health economic system and an ecological system included.
Yeah. So the being within the Healthy Food Hub gave me a very rich analysis of the food system that I continue to invoke, and on to this day. And we've talked about this in some side conversations, just about how the pandemic and COVID-19 and the mutual aid movements really have radicalized the new group of young people around food, who have been whereby they were distributors, some of the first distributors of these USDA boxes in the box program, but quickly noticed that there was a lot of inequity in that. There was a lot of there was a lot of corporate farmers that were getting paid, and stuff in boxes with stuff that people weren't eating. There was a lot of food waste happening. There was a lot of large pallets being left at warehouses on the edge of the city that then they these folks had to go retrieve and bring back to their community. So there was just a lot of injustice in the food system that rose to the surface of their minds at the moment. So I want to just maybe give you a moment, if you were speaking to those young folks who maybe feel radicalized around food, about what their next step is, what they need, what they should do now, or what they could do now to go further, right? Because I certainly think the Healthy Food Hub goes further than just it was more than just getting food to people. Food was an element to build collaborative muscles so that then we could get people into other aspects of community resilience, to your point. But if you just want to maybe speak to those young folk who might have been radicalized around food for a moment, I want to open that up.
Well, I want to thank them for being radicalized. But COVID was not the first assault. COVID was the first collapse that was so clearly obvious of the inequality of the food system. And thank God for that. And the thing for me, I would suggest that we begin to not replicate everything from nowhere. The replication, something always comes from somewhere. And I like to invite people to look at the past, what was done in the past to inform them going forward. The Healthy Food Hub was one of those vehicles that can inform our community how to go forward. If people are really serious about developing a local food system, for real, because the first crash is not the last one. That wasn't really the first one. It's been building over time. If we don't create a response and get off that track, we're going to continue to experience what's on those tracks. And for me, I think the first thing to do, we should have a conversation. We should have maybe a group conversation in some form and begin to explore how the past can inform us how to create a different future. The Healthy Food Hub was a emerging ancestral experiences in food supply chain management, in food production, and collective approaches to this, but also it was a method by which people can learn to detox from the carbon mind. We call it the carbon mind. I was on a class with some young people, but I think the problem that I observed from it, we got this carbon-based way of thinking, and you can't be what they call you can't be sound ecologically with a carbon-based mind. So what I mean by that, you can't do the economics first. First, you design a system to provide a need, right? And if designing the system based on the need, the rate of throughput through that system over time is where the economy comes into it. But the design had to be whole. It can't be just, I'm going to be a distributor. As a distributor, we went through that. We're going to be a distributor. We created the Healthy Food Hub. The hub was like this central distribution purchasing entity from farmers. And what we actually discovered in that there was no local farming production. Very, very low. So what do you have less? You have to be able to do all of it, not one thing. And I think if we can create this flow of communication and come out of that carbon based way of looking at business. Come out of the carbon based way of looking at business, how much I can extract from the community, you know, the MBA conversation. The MBA conversation is a conversation that creates the problem that you have right now. So we have to think outside of that box because that system designed what they call just in time food system, that way of thinking. They outsourced it to China. They outsource your food thousands of miles away from where you live. And those systems work when they work, but when they don't work, they fail miserably. I made a living in that system. I used to think that was the best thing since sliced bread. But when I looked at what that system actually did, it destroyed communities. So I'm guilty of contributing to the destruction of communities here in America and everywhere. Because I believe too, because I was trained and conditioned to think that's the way you do business. Not only the way you do, that's the only way to do business. And what we have to be able to do is to create something new. And new, not like it's coming out of nowhere. The past can inform the future. And we need to do that. We need to do it as soon as possible. I like to suggest we find ways of communicating with each other. Those that has a desire to really create this safety net around food in our communities. First, create some platform of communication that we can communicate and look at what the past did and create something outside of that. Um, that might be a new business model, but I don't like to think of it that way. But it's absolutely important with all these minds, these great young minds, a lot of energy, a lot of creativity. And we have to disappear this separation of the past and the present because it really is not true. There was a local food system at one time in the history. It was consciously chosen and undermined, you know. So we can reverse engineer that, right? The Healthy Food Hub reverse engineered the food system. And right now, I think it's time to share that more with people. A lot of people don't know what it really was. You know, they heard stuff, but behind that process was an intentional desire to create safety nets around food, health around food, culture around food. And for young people, I feel so privileged um, to be around young people. You know, they got the fire, the creativity. They really want to make a change. But I like to offer a way, if we can talk with each other, we can envision and also create a template to walk through. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be fast. It's not selling drugs. You don't flip it like flipping houses. It's what they call slow growth. But slow is fast. But it's something you're going to have to do. So your freedom is going to be tied to this. If you can't feed yourself, what do you think Walmart is going to do? You know, like you mentioned earlier, brother, they got the little button in the washroom. You know, when your toilet paper reaches the point of diminish, what they call um, reorder cycle.
Mm-hmm.
You've lost control of your life. I mean, it's someone designing your life. If we do this, we can control our destiny. So if we had some format of doing that, communicating with those that want to do this, I mean, you got to want it. It's like it's not easy and it's not hard either. when you're in the process of creating something, the dangerous part is that we forget that it gets hot in the kitchen. And then when it gets hot in the kitchen, the first thing we want to do is stop and run outside and get some and wipe all the sweat off before we even make the cake. So we have to learn that's a natural process. It's not unnatural. When you're in the kitchen, we're going to create heat, but we got to understand why that heat is there. That's creation. That's what they call geothermal. That's energy. Energy is we're burning something to create something. So the distinction we have to learn is not to burn each other, right? Because in burning each other, we destroy ourselves. And we never will be able to reach the point of what we say we want to do. I'm seeing that happen all over the country right now. And we forgot why we came together. You got to always remember that. But I would love to be in a conversation with anyone that wants to be in that conversation. Um, and also open to how we can galvanize what we need to make that a physical expression in the world.
Hmm. So let's maybe switch to the land conversation. Another one of those we go off on these tangents. We talk for 2.5 hours, and then we hop off and take a nod. But the state of land not only in Pembroke, so there's certainly folks may have seen Black Oak Center on the pipeline discussions, alongside that fighting the pipeline in coming through Pembroke. So just talk about the relationship to land and the importance of that as a site of contestation, as a battleground right now, and what you see as the work we need to be doing now.
Well, the one thing that we need to do is be in integrity. And what I mean by integrity, what I say is what it is. If I'm talking about a sovereign food system, you can't have a sovereign system without land. You can't have a food security program without controlling some land. It's the insecurity about not having land is what creates the insecurity. So land is so critical. Without land, it's nothing really to talk about. You living in a virtual conversation. The land is what fuels the sovereignty. I don't know if you can have sovereignty with bitcoins yet. I'm not sure, but those are sort of abstract ways of purchasing. Maybe the whole system is abstract. But
So
at the end of that chain, somebody owns some assets. Someone owns the land. Someone owns the physical distribution of products and goods. So land is so critical here. And out here in Pembroke, one of the things that brought us out here is that this is the largest land base of African people outside of the South. I know there's a lot of people in the concentrated areas of the urban section, but the most they own is a lot. You got people here that's had hundreds of acres, 50 acres, 10 acres, 40 acres, and it's black ownership. And this community here used to feed Chicago, used to feed the transitional communities that came from the South. We used to feed them from here. And in fact, we also fed people in Detroit and Cleveland. So our food now, because there's been such a land loss. If you know that, I don't know if you know that 60% of the agricultural lands in this country, at least in Illinois, I think right now, is lease. So what does that say? That means it's some private entity owns that agricultural land and they're leasing it to maybe some major corporation or farmer. So like the Microsoft guys, all these guys are buying agricultural land. Why do you think they're buying it? The commons, the to me the transition, the great turning or whatever you want to call it, is going to be the last loss of our lands. You won't own any land. You won't be able to grow any food. You don't have any sovereignty because you have to rely on somebody that may have some other alternative motives in your food. Well, maybe like keeping you unhealthy or keeping you under control. So we have to be able to get land. Right now, for us, reparation is important, even here in Pembroke, because a lot of land here has been taken from indigenous people. We have to figure out a way we can be able to galvanize enough land to where we can assure our security to some degree around food sovereignty. Don't kid yourself. Food sovereignty is directly tied to land control. The land you don't control, you have no say over. The land that you have and you have some degree of control, you can be in a conversation of sovereignty to some degree. But without any land, there is no revolution. You may have an uprising, but you won't have a revolution because the revolution started in the field. The revolution started with growing your food, feeding yourself. The revolution started in growing products and fiber that you can build and make your own clothing. That's the revolution. So we have to have land in order to do that. And there's a lot of land. And it's a lot of land for sale, too, because the corn guys don't make the money they used to make. And there's a big land shift that's going on globally, actually. So we have to be able to create a land-based operation. We have to be able to do that. I don't care if it's in an urban setting, suburban setting, and Mike, we always talked about the prairie urban model, not just the rural model, but we got, for instance, Fort Heights. It's 14,000 acres that was taken from the, the government there, and for been over a long time, they sit in these trusts that's been in existence since the Civil War. Now they took that land. They didn't buy it. And we should have rights. We should have a way that we can access those lands to make sure our communities are secure.
So the interesting sort of there's a side story for me for around Pembroke and Kankakee County. Um, I've been and I talked about in this broadcast previously. With folks that I've been digging through my family tree and really tracing roots back and trying to reconstruct things that folks hadn't done in my family in quite some time. So. Um, I got back on my father's side to Noxubee County, Mississippi. I think I looked up. That's probably about like 200 miles from Philippe. But and then on my mother's side, Clay County, Alabama, and those two, just that's just kind of the sort of southern side. But the story was when I was talking to my mother about the roots. She started talking to me about my aunt Fanny, who also had red hair. Who was the other person on my father's side who had the red hair. And my aunt Fanny, at the end of life, She was living in Chicago at the time, and they were asking her like what she wanted to do at the end of life, and she's like, take me back to moments. I want to be around my people. So
Yes.
just that
Yeah, I mean,
the Southern migration.
that's long history. When
Yeah.
you talk about that pipeline, we know we're fighting this pipeline because it's a back door into taking the land,
Mm,
right? So in this bill, they got a element in there, and they don't write it like we're going to eminent domain you. They put it in other ways. They write it in a sophisticated way, but it's now used as a vehicle to eminent domain black land
mm,
or indigenous people land. So the pipeline is more than just toxic chemicals. It's the land loss that's going to occur. Like there was a case in I think it's in Tennessee, where after the oil pipeline came, they told them that they was going to eminent domain these black landowners. They're going to take the land because they wanted to do that. They were allowed to do that. Our state has set up the structure where these corporate giants can take our land.
mm,
And we're asking the governor to take that out of that bill. Now, the language that they're using to justify this is this economic development conversation. Now, it's clear, like Richard Pryor would say, what are you going to believe what my lips say or what your eyes see? You know what that was. You look around and we have natural gas in every black community, poor community in the country, right?
mhm,
Where's the economic development? It's never been a driver for people without owning those processes, economic development. We're saying it's just a construction project that the unions, the real estate people, the bank and construction people, and Nightcore is going to make money off the construction project. It's not enough people out here for them to make a profit.
mhm,
And so we know that this is used to take land. I don't know if you remember Mama E. Mama E sent us an article, now a research paper that she did on the Pentagon. I didn't know that the Pentagon, where the land that it's on now, used to be a black agriculture community. They took that land in 30 days from our people and eminent domain them and moved them out of there. And so there's a repeat. It's the same thing that's going on here. And I want you to understand that this struggle here is not separate. We're losing land in Chicago. We're losing land in the south suburbs. We've been losing land everywhere we are. We're becoming landless people again, but there will be no place to migrate if there's no land base that we can migrate to, not just a building. So that pipeline is not about economic development. We know it's about land taking, land loss, taking the land, and everybody should be raising hell about that
mhm,
because it's 60% of the land is owned by private entities. What's left? Rest of it is owned by governments and other institutions. It's very low. It's less than right now down here. I think it's less than 20% is owned by the people, indigenous people, and they used to own more than that. So yes, the pipeline is not just a issue of environment, but it's an issue of land stealing. How the modern way, instead of a mob coming in and burning us out, they they got a new method of taking our land, and that's because economic development requires that we run these pipelines through your land. Of course, we're going to contaminate your water stream. Of course, there's going to be leakages. And this company has no historical integrity around making sure that don't happen.
mhm,
So water is the other element in that. So the land loss and the water is a major problem here in Pembroke. So that pipeline means they coming through the back door to take our land and move us out of here. That's how the community is starting to hold that. And
Mhm.
it's true.
Yeah. Wow, one of the things that we used to do at the Healthy Food Hub, and you've given some of this forecast already, um, is that we used to bring the ancient one on for the annual community resilience address, and we tried to do a little bit of something pre-pandemic, but didn't get to pull it off necessarily. Um, so I wonder if if we might just take a moment to divert, and you've picked up some tangents already in terms of land and in terms of water. I'm sitting here right now, and this is
Did I lose you, Bob?
no, you didn't lose me. Can you still hear me,
Yeah,
Bob?
I lost you.
Can you still hear me? Hello,
Hello?
can you hear me, Bob? Bob afraid. So I can still hear you, Bob. I can still hear you on the mic, Bob.
Yeah, I mean it froze, man.
Okay.
I mean I can't hear you and your face is it froze,
Okay.
and it's did we lose we ran out of time?
No, no, we're still on. We're echoing a
Yeah,
bit.
I can't hear you. Yeah, that's I'm only calling you from my cell. It's not the
All right, so I'm gonna push you out of the interview and just click that link and come right back in.
okay then.
All right, the wonders of technology. So we will have Baba Fred back on in a minute so that we can continue this, because this has been certainly a diggable conversation. All right, back into it.
We back on?
We are back on.
Yeah.
Can you hear me, Baba?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, okay, cool. So I was about to make a pivot towards the community resilience address that used to happen at the Healthy Food Hub, and I was saying we were trying to set one up pre-pandemic, and we didn't we sort of ran out of time to kind of get that together. But right now I am looking at the drought monitor, and this is something that I learned to look at based upon our conversations, based upon those community resilience addresses. When I was doing some social media for the Healthy Food Hub, I used to send out images of the drought monitor. So for folks who don't know what the drought monitor is, just go to droughtmonitor.unl.edu, and you can see kind of the state of water in the U.S. Just to give you, if you just want to kind of terrify yourself. But I mean, as we expect and anticipate, like the whole West Coast and the whole western region of the U.S. is red. Just because it's very very dry out there. Um, so I just want to give a moment for you to maybe top line the most important community resilience challenges, ideas that you would put forward in that sustainability or that community resilience address if we were putting one forward this year.
Well, I guess we can reawaken Dr. Doom.
Bring it back, doom and gloom.
Uh, it's not doom and gloom. It's
No,
like how
absolutely.
to deal with the reality of what's there without being depressed, right?
Yes.
How to look at what's occurring without being depressed or being resigned. And by looking at it that way, that can lead to be some actionable things.
Hmm.
So, what are some of the actionable things that we can do looking at what we're looking at? The first thing is to What they call a first responder is the person sitting next to you. We got to have more conscious relationship with each other because we can't handle this in isolation. One person can't handle it. We got to create this pool. I guess it's a conversation to have, a transformative conversation around what do we do? There are a lot of things that you can do, but what can we do in relationship to each other to address the issue of water, to address the issue of energy, and our health and food? We can begin to look at how we can create. We're not going to stop the pattern, all right? These patterns been emerging. Even if we stop doing what we're doing right now, th- those patterns are going to come forward. But what we can do is look at ways we can mitigate and increase our capacity to live through it. We got to look at how we can live through this. We're not going to stop climate change. Okay, this is something that started before my generation. And some of these cycles are older than this civilization. Some of them are older than 10, 15, 20,000 years. These are cycles that occur, not just from our input, but cycles that occur in terms where the growing seasons move geologically. Where places, I don't know if you remember the conversation about the boat people that was raiding Egypt. They were raiding Egypt for a reason. They had food and not for power and all that. They were starving. So because there were areas that was not capable of providing food, couldn't grow anything on it. Maybe California and out west, maybe some of those areas. People may be migrating toward the Midwest because we got more water. In fact, we got the most fertile soil in the country. And we got we got fresh water right off your back door. And we need to start looking at ways that we can personally, not only personally, I got reducing the amount of water that you use. That's one approach, but it's much bigger than that. We got to look at how do we use less water and enjoy the use of less water. See, we the less of is perceived as poor.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm less. I'm not prosperous because prosperity means I can leave the water on all day long.
Right.
It has no impact on anything, right? I can leave my lights on all day long. It doesn't matter. But these are all finite resources. What I mean by finite, it takes a long time for those aquifers to be recharged. Now, some of them are old as heck. We into some aquifers that's 10,000 years or older, and we're drawing the water from that. We have to look at that without being depressed. We can look at it like an opportunity. And I think that's the pathway to deal with the facts of what's happening. And not being allowed to be put in a space of fear about it. Because the fear that they use in the Gavin, oh, we finna all burn to hell. You know, I got a friend, Carla, she was on our board. She lived in California. She said, I cannot go back to California because I'm tired of smelling the smoke. I'm tired of inhaling so much smoke. I mean, that's pretty awful to be able to say that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we're being impacted by that too. So we have to create ways and create environments that allow us to live through this until we begin to create a different way of managing our water, a different way of growing our foods, a different way of doing all these things that makes life meaningful. Now, that's one thing what I call fossil fuel can help us transition into. And that's the resistance that's going on the planet. They don't want it. They want to be the fuel forever, ever. They want to be in there. The farming methods want to be the kind that you're just spraying water all over the place. And if it hits the plant, so be it.
Mhm.
But if it's hydrating the air, then that's good too. You know, Spray it everywhere. Let's suck all the water out of the earth and our aquifers that be able to allow us to nourish and have the good quality water to make life sustainable. We can do this.
Mhm.
It's not impossible. It's nothing really to be frightened of. It feels so bad. I ain't gonna lie to you. It doesn't feel good because the unwillingness of people to just stop and say, "This is a fact." Now, what do you deal with it? What do you do with that reality? You don't beat it up until it go away. You look at it and you embrace it. Just like now, we just came through the most horrendous time in our history, and we're trying to act like it didn't happen. It did happen, everyone.
Mhm.
You experienced collapse. We have to be able to embrace collapse, not like it was a terrible thing. Some of it was self induced. Maybe the government imposed a lot on us. Maybe it was a test to see if we'll follow. Somebody sit down, shut up, go back in the house, put your mask on, don't get close to your family, and all those kind of things. Justifiably stated. We don't know how much justifiably stated, but it was certainly a mechanism to get people in a state of fear. And even that state of fear, we never addressed the real problem: the inequality of the food system, the unjust health system, the economic inequality, all those things, and we haven't dealt with that. That was a real problem in the first place. And so I'm suggesting that we stop and look at it without fear and panic. Like I remember you were saying that, well, this COVID messed up my whole year. So what was the opportunity in that? So how do we look at the possibility of what this collapse could be for us? A collapse is also an opportunity to change the course and direction. Now, if we choose not to change our course of direction, we will continue to experience collapse. So we need to look at collapse as a signal that we need to change direction. We're not going to avoid dying. That's not the one you can get away from. But the discomfort in how we live, we can choose to do something different. And that's where, as you say, Bob, it's like the resilient mind. What is a resilient mind? It's like having a half empty conversation or half full. And if it's half empty or is it half full, how do we make sure we reduce the risk of that? We have to look at it that way because otherwise we'd be in a state of panic. We would freeze and not do anything. And that's what my concern is, that people would freeze and not do anything. They won't take the lesson that occurred. Wow, what does this really say? Not the fear, what level of fear we got going on with our politicians. Let's take it up to level 9. When we don't that way, level 9, we won't look at the institutional structure of discrimination, of inequality, to resolve the problem that started the same problem. So we can do this. And in fact, you really don't have an option. you know, you can stay in fear and freeze up, and, or you could be in the possibility of what the feedback this is telling you. The feedback is that something is not working. If somebody can cut your water off like that, you know that doesn't work. That's not a workable situation to be in. Like what's happening in California and out west, you know. But we can do this. It's not that we have much of a choice. We don't have to keep our heads in the sand. This is an opportunity actually to own. and direct your future. And that's the thing I love about collapse. Collapse is a window of opportunity to direct your future. Even if it was a collapse in your health, you was on a trajectory of bad habits and all the rest of it. Wow, you broke down, and wow, the feedback is I can change as long as I got breath, right? We still got breath, so we can change the trajectory that we experience. We don't have to keep going to repeated collapse. We notice the things of our lifestyle will transition out of that. That's a natural cycle. We can't keep doing what we've been doing because it doesn't really work for everybody.
Hmm.
That's the problem. It doesn't work for everybody. It may work for a small circle of people, but it doesn't work for everybody. But we can't sit up here in state of fear and not do anything and not take the feedback of the collapse that occurred, which is the intent of it was to change the trajectory of your behavior. So what behavior you need to change? What is it that you need to change so you don't keep re-experiencing that? I know a lot of people are trying to prep, store waters and all that. That's a short-term response, right? I got my water, I got my solar panels. You ain't got nothing. Okay, my lights will be on and everybody in darkness but me. That's not sustainable.
Hmm. Yeah.
How long you think you're gonna be in light and nobody else? That's not sustainable.
Yeah.
The thing is to make sure we create, I don't know what to call it, a way that everybody has a possibility of having light.
Yeah.
You know, all of us can have light, not just those with a lot of money. Like we out here wrestling with different technologies of well, our energy track, right? With the geothermal, and we've been doing there's a lot of ways that you can do the low grade or what they call the sustainable end of putting energy systems in. Now it might not look like $100,000 system, but it's a functional design that meets the basic requirements for your existence. We got to have it. And you don't want to wait until the other thing completely fall apart and you got no other option. You lost your more freedom. We need to embrace the freedom we have right now. And this is what I say emerged out of the Black Lives Matter and all that like a possibility. All this emerged out of new freedom. We can choose. We just got to continue to take the power and feel empowered by that. Take control of your life. They talk about take back America. Take back your life. We got to take back our life from these giants that's directing us, and we don't even know that we didn't make the decision to do it. So let's not freeze. Let's look at and embrace the reality of what is. That's power. We don't have to get depressed about it. It's a lot of people depressed, and all that. I mean, I can get depression. I know what that is too. But it's no power in that. What is the opportunity? The real opportunity, and this is the central core of what it is to be resilient. Let's create a new story about collapse. Let's create a new story about what we're going through that allow us to be able to go through it with power, compassion, and love. That's the story that I want to create. Power, compassion, and love. Not isolation, separateness, power, compassion, and love. That's the opportunity because you can't design an energy system without the inclusion of everybody that needs
Yeah.
it. I don't care if you can be in a gated community and all that. You won't be gated for long. Um, like I had one friend, I said, "How many people can you kill?" I said, "The thing to do is to share with as many people as possible, so there's enough in the environment that allows balancing." and freedom to occur every place else. All we need is a small number of people. You don't need a mass movement. But if there's enough of us in this conversation and practicing this while we can still practice, I want to say this. The TED Talks are over. They actually pulled the trigger last year. I know we talked about the trigger being pulled, and you want to get ready before the trigger is pulled. You want to practice before the real thing comes. The real thing is here. So, but we still have time to not practice in that sense, like a mock practice, but actually begin to explore ways we can share a practice. How do we share a practice around our water conservation? How do we share a practice around how we get food and energy in a way that's not so predominantly economically driven? These are the systems that we need to put in place. The Lone Ranger or the MacGyver is not going to be able to make it in the future.
Yeah, and
There's no MacGyver in the future.
well, in our conversations, I've always, lifted it up as build more gardens and fewer fences. Just because
Yeah,
I mean, yeah, certainly the fences can and will be knocked down, and I mean, and the gardens can certainly be picked, to the bone. But at least you have an opportunity in the garden to say, hey, I mean, we gonna still keep planting until we can't plant no more, and you can still
right.
come here, you can still harvest from here, we are still part of this together. But that's ultimately the conversation about bringing people, as they say in organizing spaces nowadays, calling people in instead of calling people out, right? Because you call people out and
Yeah,
try to like excommunicate them beyond the realm of the fence, and you call someone in and you say, look, I mean, this is our garden, this is our thing together. Let's work together to maintain it. So
yeah. It's something about the power of the plate.
mhm.
See, that's the one element, regardless of I'm being a thug or a non-thug or whatever I am in my expressions in my relationship with people. Even the most gangsterous person want their children to be healthy. So all of us love our babies, and all of us really want to be healthy. It's one thing I've noticed. I don't care who we with. When you feel bad, it's something you don't want to keep feeling bad, right?
Mhm.
You want to feel a high level, high quality of well-being in your body. I think that's the one thread that every human being can identify with. Because when it's not there, you do some of the weirdest things. I say most of this stuff is coming from a state of illness physically, which also impacts our emotional and psychological well-being. And by not controlling those elements that does that, we've outsourced that to the pharmaceutical industry, food and drugs, all the rest of them, and even the Department of Agriculture. These big institutions, they're not committed to growing food that don't harm people.
Mhm.
They're committed to growing food that they can make the max amount of money on. Now, if along the way you just happen to be healthy, it's an accident because it sure wasn't in the design.
Right.
So we can begin to design. We are really designers. To me, that's what's happening now. We can wake up to the power of our ability to design our own life. The other life that failed and stopped was somebody else's design. What are we going to design? That's the question. We can design our life. It's not over. We have to recreate a new world for real. Not a TED talk. Not that. We got to actually practice and detox within ourselves and allow that detoxification to happen. We can do certain things like hold on to it. Maybe if somebody want to express the detox, give them 10 seconds. you know, if you consciously see it, you can play with it. because the seeing of it creates a gap, a space. It creates a gap between the sense of what that is and your consciousness. And that's just enough space to let it sort of decompose a little bit. And the more gaps you can create, the more it allows it to decompose and compost itself. So we need to become masterful composters,
Hmm.
not only in our garden, but our internal garden too, which is the most important thing. This is not having a garden. We just think we're gonna have a garden. I'm gonna have my green this, and I'm hating you all night long. That's not gonna work because whatever the internal designer feels and thinks is gonna flow into the outer world, right? So we got to work on both of them, not just growing the food or actively designing that. We got to work on our internal design too. We got to decarbonize our brain.
Hmm.
They want to decarbonize the economy, but they don't want to decarbonize. And you'll know the decarbonization occurs because you're so used to keeping that switch on, regardless of how much fuel it burns, how much carbon it puts in the environment. You don't want to stop that. You got to be able to look at it and look at how you caused it to happen in the first place. You got to own it. We got to own the breakdown, as we used to say, Bob and Mike.
Right.
We got to own the breakdown. If we own it, then you have power over it. But if you put it on somebody else, or say the system made me do it, which it may have impact you, but that's not no power. You do have power to break free from that, but you don't think you do. But you don't have really much of a choice. You're either gonna do it or you're not gonna exist. I mean, that's the fact of what is. We can't keep doing what we've been doing, but it's a wonderful opportunity to do something new. It's a gift.
Yes. And we have been on the recording for just near, about 90 minutes. And so I want to pivot us, into a helpful close, since I know we can always do this for 2 hours, but we can do a part two at some other
Yeah,
time.
we can do a part two.
Yes. And I just want, to kind of top line a few things. So we've talked in terms of the community resilience address, about, building, more gardens and fewer fences, or as Autumn Brown talks about, the most helpful thing that you need in a time of apocalypse, in a time of collapse, is not necessarily going to be, bullets or blue jeans or butter. But it's going to be knowing who the people are around you, knowing your neighbors, knowing who you're connected to, knowing who your community is, and I mean, effectively in the metaphorical way, knowing where your bread is buttered, which is not necessarily in downtown, but it's where you live. Um, so that's what I want to lift up for folks. I mean, just knowing where you reside and who you're connected to. Some call to action points, that we kind of talked about earlier, renewing and decolonizing your relationship to land. These land fights that are happening in Pembroke are not just specific to Pembroke. They are things that are sites of contestation all around the U.S. and all around the world. So we need to be invested in supporting the folks who are engaged in those struggles on those front lines. Um, you know, um, Becoming a new generation of food producers, is listed here, but that's not necessarily it's not about like, some, new commodity producers, right? We don't need new folks, who are producing food just to kind of, control some other folks. But, if we're wanting to kind of, invest and engage in this process of transforming ourselves, by becoming reconnected to the land, by becoming reconnected to our food, by having food as this organizing entity, as this organizing tool, as this tool for community. It is then we want to make sure that we are becoming a new type of people around food, and a new type of people who can produce their own food. And then remembering that legacy of land stewardship from which you arise, from which we arise. We are the children and the descendants of a great legacy of land stewardship, of a great legacy of people who knew how to understand their relationship to nature and their relationship to the outdoors. I was listening to Rue Map of Outdoor Afro earlier, talking about Harriet Tubman as an outdoorsman or an outdoors woman, outdoors person, right? You know, and certainly we've got the legacy of Carver as someone who brought regenerative farming to the U.S. I mean, there would be no regenerative farming without the great scientific mind that we raised up, right? Within our community. So remembering that legacy of land stewardship from which we arise, because that's the legacy that we return to. So I want to pitch it to you, Baba Fred, with any other calls to action and
8 o'clock.
closing thoughts that you want to drop into.
Yeah, it goes back to first responders, the person sitting next to you, and knowing your neighbor. As Bill Mollison used to say, food security is looking out your window and seeing your neighbor in their garden.
Hmm.
I mean, that's a profound statement to make.
Yeah.
Um, but yes, we can do this. It's not much of an option, so just get off it. You ain't got no option. But the option you do have, the opportunities that we can really redesign our lives. Thank God that we can redesign our lives. We're not at the whim and the mercy. Only out of our choice are we doing that. And we can begin, 1 inch is better than no inches. 1 inch movement away from the track. Before you hit that wall, you probably move enough over time that you will not be hitting the wall, except the ultimate wall of not hitting but transitioning. But you won't be hitting the wall. So an inch is better than no inch. And then we have to look at it like that. Incremental change, and behavior can transform yourself. But you can make a complete shift in paradigm within your brain, within your mind. And that's not a time-based conversation. You can actually do that, not based on time, like I need 50 years. You don't have 50 years.
Hmm.
We gotta come up with methods where we can leap, and we can do it. It's been done before, but we are so powerful. That's what probably scared the hell out of everybody. You get scared, and sometimes we don't want the power because we don't want to be responsible. But you don't have a choice. It's choiceless. It's not like I'm gonna make this choice and I'm not gonna be responsible for my life. You are responsible. You are responsible for the environment. We are the world, as Christian Murray used to say. We are the world that we live in. So let's own it.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
with that, we can say we have a decision map. It's either move or be moved, but whichever choice you make, the earth is going to move.
Yeah.
so,
It's gonna move.
so
Yeah.
I want folks to make sure that you go to blackoakcenter.org, blackoakcenter.org, and make sure that you check out the work of Black Oak Center on Instagram at Black Oak Center Chicago. You can find it on Facebook, Black Oak Center for Sustainable Renewable Living. So make sure that you are engaged in the work of Black Oaks. Make sure that as the mobile markets do return, that you are engaged in the work of the Healthy Food Hub and the mobile markets there. And just make sure you keep your ear to the ground because there are always new developments on the horizon. And while you are waiting for those new developments, make sure you invested in those calls to action to get to know the people around you, to begin to build the local resilience that is, the relationships with the people that will, ensure that we have the community we need as collapse and challenge and other things continue to occur well into the future. And I really appreciate folks who were able to join and check out this broadcast this evening. Even though technical challenges did abound, I ended up posting to the wrong page. I meant to post to the Kola Nut Collaborative, posted to my own page, but that's okay. We're gonna move it. And we had a few hiccups in terms of the power, but that's okay because we adapted, because we were resilient. Word of the day,
Yeah, that's what collapse look like, right?
right?
Right. Don't get mad at it.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So So we'll be back for another part on this discussion. Until then, this has been your edition of the Ujamaa Hour, your exploration of the Black social and solidarity economy through intimate, informal conversation. I am Michael Tekin Strode, and this is Baba Fred Carter, and we will be back on
Yeah.
another edition.
Yeah. Tell them check the website out. We got classes going on this weekend too, Bob. We
Classes
got B
going on.
classes and B's. Yeah, you'll see it on the website. It's not too late to register. B classes. Saturday from 10 to 1 o'clock, the B class. Very deep dive, which is a canning and value added workshop.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we need to make jam.
Yes.
So thank you for the opportunity, and I look forward to anyone that wants to be in this conversation. I mean, let's let's have a prosperous ride while we go down the other side of the hill. We
Yeah.
can do that.
We can
Okay.
absolutely do that, and as you see that the technology was not agreeing with me a moment. So pardon me for folks who got all disoriented while those cameras were moving around, because somehow my mouse jumped and moved the scene. But we are resilient. Make sure you check out blackoakcenter.org and get into those classes. And we'll be back again for another conversation with the ancient one, Papa Fred
The
Carter.
ancient one. All right now. Peace
All
and
right.
love in the garden, everybody.
Peace and love in the garden, Bob.
Yeah. Peace.